Sir, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And today we want to learn about a new program called GHOST. So we're here with Jeremy Schock. Sir, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little bit of your career background.
Yeah, thanks. So like you said, my name is Jeremy Schock. I am currently the Signals Intelligence or SIGINT branch chief in the Intelligence Surveillance and Reconnaissance Sensors Division. So I started my career back in 2002 in LCMC as a manufacturing engineer in the EN Directorate. Started in the C-17 program office. And then did rotations through the Joint Primary Aircraft Training System SPO, the F-22 SPO, and then the F-35 Joint Program Office, all as a manufacturing engineer. Then career broadened over into the program management career field, into C5 as their production IPT lead, and then now into the current job I'm in the sensors division. So.
Okay, and we're going to talk about GHOST, which is the Global High Altitude Open System Sensor Technology Program. Another one of our great acronyms, but give us kind of a basic rundown of what GHOST is.
Sure. Yeah. So GHOST is the next generation signals intelligence, or again, SIGINT sensor. It's meant to replace the Airborne Signals Intelligence Payload, or ASIP system that's currently out in the theater flying on the U-2 and the RQ-4 Global Hawk program. So we're trying to develop that system has issues with diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages, or DMS-MS. So it needs replaced. So GHOST is the system we're trying to design to do that. And we're trying to develop the system as very platform, agile, very open architecture system to help us, allow for rapid insertion of new technologies to outpace emerging threats that are out there in the adversary.
Mm-hmm. So let's expound on that a little bit. So you say platform agnostic, so you would be able to move it from a UAV or to a manned aircraft or to a variety of different systems.
Yes, that's correct. So our requirement is to initially install the platform and test on the U-2 for GHOST. However, like you said, we are designing it as platform agnostic or agile, so that it's easily transferable from one airborne platform to another, based upon however much size, weight, and power or swap is available on those platforms. The open architecture design there does allow for that, so we can scale in and out. The more size, weight, power available, we can put more resources in. The less available, then we may have to scale some and take some out. But the platform, or the open architecture, does allow for that to be very platform agile.
So open architecture, are you talking about the way that it integrates with the aircraft's software?
Yes, actually, when we say open architecture, we're really talking several different things. One, like you mentioned, how it does interface with the airborne platform itself. Also, how it communicates with the ground, right? It's a sensor that uses the airborne platform's data link and sends data down to the ground. Currently, the Air Force Distributed Common Ground System, or the DCGS. So we want common interfaces down to the ground too. We want to send common messages down so that they can easily be shared across through the intel community as a whole. And then also, we did want to define and design in the open interfaces. We required some open interfaces between within the system, I should say, between some of the connections, the boxes themselves, maybe even in the software per se, so that it's sharing messages box to box or chassis to chassis inside the system, so that, you know, further down the road, if, you know, we have perhaps some of those DMS/MSM challenges in a system or component, we could even pull that system component out, put a new system or component in. If we require the interfaces to be standard.
So do you mean like, say it's got a camera assigned or attached to the system, and so it interfaces with that camera, but then 2 years from now, someone creates a better camera, we could swap the old one out and put a new one in, and it would be kind of like a seamless integration for it. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, a good example is like the mouse on your computer, right? They all connect with like a USB connection, right? So, you know, you may want one of those fancy mouses, you know, mice to use with the scroll ball. Well, if it has a USB connection on the end, it's easy to just pull your normal standard mouse out, put that in, same connection, plug and play, it works. That's a good analogy for it.
Okay, all right. And what about like doing updates and things of that nature? Does it give you a better ability for like software updates or you know, changes or modifications?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we have required, again, is a lot of open interfaces even within the software. So what we've required and what we want for our vendors to create essentially a virtual environment where we could even load third-party applications. So a good example there would be your Apple iPhone per se. So really what we're asking for the Ghost sensor is your phone loaded with, you know, your operating software for the phone that we could then even load. You know, you go to the App Store and just pull down an app and load it. It may or may not be the OEM's app. Maybe it's a different OEMs. Maybe it's a third party. It may even be a government owned app from some other government agency. So that the open architecture requirements definitely help there in the software environment as well too.
Yeah. And so that keeps us out of these traps that we get into a lot of times where we have stovepipe systems, and then, you know, the only way is to go back to the original manufacturer to get updates, and which can be slow and doesn't always take advantage of cutting edge technology that maybe somebody else has invented.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is avoid that proprietary vendor lock. The government, then we could control the baseline a little bit more. We could update the system ourselves. You know, if newer technology comes available, it should be theoretically plug and play with maybe minimal or no integration requirements needed. The other thing it allows us to do is, you know, as we fight the adversary and the airplane flies in different theaters, that the adversaries are different in those theaters. So we could even have specific mission loads for the software, you know, depending on which theater it's flying in. We don't have to go back to the OEM and have, you know, maybe a Pacific theater load versus a, you know, CENTCOM mission load. We could do that ourselves on the flight line. The operators or the flight line mechanics could load whatever they need to load for the actual mission they're going to go accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah, because, you know, technology is constantly changing. I heard someone earlier today say that the iPhone was invented in 2007, and Apple is currently on the 13th version of the iPhone. So in just that amount of time, you know, it's changed that many times.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking roughly one a year there, right? So that's what we want to do, is design Ghost to be kind of that system for 20 years, right? We'll start with the current technology, but we can always keep it fresh ourselves and refresh and keep pace with the adversaries as we go.
Yeah. I know that this was a Section 804 acquisition effort, which is kind of a faster system. It's outside the typical milestone system in the 5000 series. So talk to us a little bit about how the Section 804 helps you with this program.
Yeah, so thanks. The Section 804 or middle tier of acquisition, our PEO, Colonel Rogers, did designate the GHOST program as a Section 804 program on June 16th this year. It does allow you a lot of flexibility in tailoring out some of the requirements of a traditional or 5,000 type program. So we have definitely embraced that on this program. We're trying to go as fast as we can to get this capability in the hands of the warfighter as fast as possible. One thing I will say is the team has really embraced the idea, though, of just because we can tailor things out doesn't mean we should tailor things out. We've taken a very thoughtful approach to all of those things that we've tailored. And some things that we could, are allowed to tailor out, we've decided, no, we probably need to do that. There's a reason some of those requirements were good things to do. And just because we don't have to do it doesn't mean we shouldn't. So we've tried to embrace that and tailor as much as possible where needed, but not just blanket. We've tried to not use that just as a crutch and just strip everything out and go as fast as possible.
Right.
Really trying to embrace the Dr. Roper speed with discipline approach, if you will.
So where does the progress stand right now? What's your status in the program?
All right, so let me back up just to the beginning. So back in January 2020, we were approved for our acquisition strategy and essentially kicked off and started the program. We went from there in April of 2020, and we staffed a limited competition JNA due to national security. So the system is largely classified, top secret, sensitive compartmented information, TSSCI. So we staffed because we didn't want to publish, our requirements for that out on FedBizOps and let our adversaries know exactly what we're trying to do. So we had to staff our JNA up to Dr. Roper. And if you think about just the time, April 2020, that's right about when COVID hit. So we were right in the middle of trying to push a classified JNA up there, and then got to deal with COVID through all of that, but still managed to get it done. And it was only in the Pentagon for 2 weeks, and we got 0 comments back, got Dr. Roper's signature on that in 2 weeks. Then we sent out our request for proposal in August to do a competition, and received our proposals back in October of last year. And then the team worked from October to June of this year. And then June 18th this year, we did award contracts to 3 vendors for this. So we awarded contracts to L3 Harris, BAE, and Northrop Grumman. So that's kind of where we are. It's a real short 12-month period of performance. And I guess one thing I failed to mention early on about the GHOST program and kind of where we're going, we did construct the program in kind of multiple phases. That's how we kind of broke down the Section 804 program. So we took the rapid prototyping phase that we're in and even split that into 2 phases. So phase 1 is really a lab demo. We decided we would take 3 vendors along phase 1 and let them all do a lab prototype, which we're going to take up to the Air Force Research Lab, Open Architecture Technology Lab, or ODL, up in Rome, New York, and we're going to test their systems in the lab. We're really focusing on testing the open architecture of their systems, because that's obviously key to us, as we kind of explained earlier, being as such that the system, that's one of the key tenets of the system. So we really wanted to kind of take our time and make sure we got that right. Like you said earlier, a lot of programs get that wrong and you get proprietary vendor locked. So we really wanted to focus and do that correctly. So that is phase 1. It's a real quick 12-month with 3 vendors. So my team is off. We awarded those contracts in June 18th this year, like I mentioned. So we're off kind of running and executing the program, and we're doing it 3 times. We're doing it with 3 different vendors, kind of working through with them, letting them each do their designs. We're doing almost up to CDR like, critical design reviews with each of them, and then culminating in that open architecture assessment. So most teams, you're executing a program and you're working with your one OEM. Well, we're doing that with 3 OEMs, trying to keep everything straight and take all 3 of them in parallel up till the culminating event that will end phase one with. And then the intention is after that, then we'll do another source selection amongst those 3 vendors, down select to just 1 vendor, and then they will build a flyable prototype that will then take and integrate onto an airplane and go do real flight tests. So the team felt like that was a great strategy and a way to ensure that we got what we really needed and what was the most important in open architecture, and do it in a lab environment, so we didn't spend a ton of money and resources and try to flight test 3 systems, but also keep the competition alive until we get into later on past the kind of the design portion, and then pick the one we like the best, and then integrate onto an airplane and start flying.
So keeping that competition around obviously has a lot of advantages for the government, because it gives you a better shot of getting what you really need. But it is a bigger challenge for your team, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we just had last week, we had our first in process review, or IPR as we called them, last week up at the Air Force Research Lab in Rome, New York, where we're going to do the assessments. And we had each of the vendors in, they each came in for a day. And yeah, it was a busy week, right, to doing design type reviews and meetings with 3 different vendors back to back to back. So yeah, it's definitely challenging and a resource constraint on my team, but I think they're definitely all up to the challenge and looking forward to it. And I think the strategy will pay off in the end, and end up with the right product for the warfighter down the road.
Yeah. And then, so when you down select, you'll have a flyable device. So it's going to be like a pod or something that hangs under?
So it goes in a pod on the U2. Yeah, we're not developing or designing the pod. We're just designing the system that would fit in the pod, the right super pod on the U2. Yes.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about, aerodynamics or anything like that. It's just got to fit inside there and use the right power. And
correct. Yeah, we don't have to worry too much about any of the airworthiness or outside mold line of the airplane. Yeah, we kind of gave them the specs to fit inside the pod and keep it contained into just the one pod. So.
All right. Well, sir, that pretty much brings us to the end of our time. But before we close out, is there anything that I didn't ask you about, or anything that you want to add on?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just like to, take the time and opportunity to, thank my team. They've done a great job from January 2020 and even before, but from the time we crafted the acquisition strategy to now, just been a ton of work put on, and all through COVID, really. I mean, most of that time has been through COVID, and in the environment we're in, working in a classified environment. We didn't really have the opportunity to step out and do mass telework. We had to think about how to do it smartly, safely, which we have done so far. We've had minimal disruptions with COVID, but we've had to work through all of that, and a lot of work. So the team has put in tons and tons of hours and time and sweat and tears. So just I can't thank my team enough, and the amount of work that they've done, and now we're into execution, and they're working more and harder, and then right behind us is another source selection. So there's a lot of work on the horizon, but what they've done is just been simply amazing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that as I close. So.
Well, the advantage is soon enough you'll be in the lab testing devices, and you'll be able to see kind of the fruits of your labor.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely can't wait for that. It was nice last week, finally being on site at the lab, actually talking to the OEMs and the vendors, and actually being working Ghost and getting kind of out of the office and the paperwork exercises that we all do, and starting the process, if you will.
And Rome, New York is beautiful this time of year too. So
Yeah, yeah, maybe not in February when we plan on being up there.
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, sir, thanks again for joining us on Leadership Log today. We really appreciate your time and taking the opportunity to explain to us about Ghost.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.